This program was first broadcast on Canterbury's community access radio station Plains FM 96.9 and was made with the assistance of New Zealand On Air.
It's time for Emergence News on Plains FM 96.9, citizen-made radio.
Tēnā koutou and greetings to all our listeners who tune into Plains FM to hear news and views from the community of Christchurch, New Zealand. We are Emergence News, and this is our second program streaming to you via Zoom. As most will be aware, we are in lockdown due to the COVID-19 coronavirus that has in a very short space of time totally transformed the way we are able to live our lives. For the approximately 4,500 global volunteers who have taken on the role of sharing this message of hope, what is happening is no surprise, and it is a hopeful sign that the times really are finally changing. Our role is to share the good news that we are not alone at this time of trial and tribulation. Walking among us as a man among men is Maitreya. He comes as the expected one of all spiritual traditions. He has many names: Krishna, the Messiah, Kalki Avatar, Maitreya Buddha. However, his role at this time is to wear the mantle of the Christ. As the Christ, he embodies the quality of unconditional love. He comes not as a religious figure, but as the world teacher, the ever-coming one, sent, as he says, by his Father in heaven to help, protect, guide, and inspire us during this tumultuous transition into a more compassionate, connected humanity. As members of the human race, we are beginning to recognize ourselves as one family. Maitreya has come with a group of beings who many know as the Masters of Wisdom or the Lords of Compassion. We have in several programs talked about them as individuals and what little we know of their roles. They are the inspiration and driving force behind the technological advances, education reforms, modern religious thought, and political and social justice movements. Benjamin Creme, who brought this message of hope first into the world, has said that Maitreya has been working extensively in the political field. That makes sense, as it is the political will of governments that will change the way we live our lives. It is interesting to observe that even though we have had, for decades, millions of people dying annually from starvation, continual wars killing millions of innocent people, and climate concerns that could threaten our ability to survive as a species on this planet, it has taken a virus that will kill a far fewer to make governments do what they said was impossible. Who would have thought 2 months ago that all non-essential flights would be cancelled? Shops, schools, cinemas, cafes, restaurants closed, and all sports and social gatherings banned. The speed with which it has happened shows clearly that where there is the will, there is the way. It also raises a question that each of us might ask ourselves. Do we want to go back to the same life as before? Or is this the time to imagine and create new ways of being in this world? A world of sharing and kindness, and standing shoulder and shoulder to protect and support our brothers and sisters, wherever on this earth they may live. We believe that humanity is getting ready to make the necessary changes, both personally, nationally, and globally. We are calling this program Practising for the Future. We hope that some of the stories we share bring you hope that a new world is possible, and that each individual and collective effort is creating and actioning a new way of being. So with me on this Zoom call today is Peter and Nigel. Hi, guys.
Hi there, Shafir.
Welcome. And what have you got for us today?
I'm going to be talking about sharing the resources of the world and all sorts of examples of this.
Lovely.
Shafir.
Thank you.
And
Shafir,
Nigel? Yeah, I'm, as you just said, Benjamin Creme used to cover many political events, and he talked often about most of us living on Earth, most of humanity, living in times of strain, living under the weight of anxiety and depression and tension. And of course, that's very applicable at the moment. And he used to talk about our political and economic structures needing to change. They will and must change to better serve us all, not just the rich, privileged top 1%. So today, I'm going to focus on some of those political and economic predictions and forecasts that CREM made over the last 20 to 40 years. And I want to talk about some of the examples of that are unfolding right now.
Fantastic. Look forward to hearing it. Okay, Peter, so we've talked about sharing many times. What have you got for us today?
Well, our major source of information, as we all know, is Share International, and the magazine says it all. And Benjamin Crem's books, including Maitreya's Missions, in 3 volumes. The theme, of course, is sharing of the world's resources to create justice and peace. In this time of viruses and lockdown, it is heartening to see some nations reaching out and sharing their medical supplies and personnel to those without. I noticed that Chinese response has been amazing. Last count, 58 countries that had supplies delivered to them. Russia too, sending teams and supplies to Italy and others. Cuba, sorely pressed by the USA, still willing to help with doctors and nurses to Africa. Absolutely amazing. Mm-hmm. On the more local scene, people are getting over me first and leaving food out for others in need. Shafir was talking about this the other day, just in our neighbourhood, and people leaving food out, weren't they, Shafir?
Yeah, so leaving feijoas and things down, and apples and the fruits of the harvest at the moment, sort of all around the place at the end of drives and things.
That's right. And I saw in Sydney, someone had nailed up a box on a tree and filling it up with groceries and asked people to help themselves and to put things in there if they had surplus. And it's exactly the things that we need to see and indication of this sharing. So this is the third world countries, of course, live in such insecurity of food that people die. There's something like 9 million people die of starvation every year. We seem to be worried about a few thousand, I suppose, with this virus and that sort of thing, but we're incredibly self-centered. And, the diseases that we could well eradicate, like malaria and dengue fever and TB, are things that we can control, but they're over there. And so we give a few dollars just to appease our conscience and leave it at that. But honestly, there's a lot more that we could do. There are many examples of people spending their life helping others and sharing their resources. I love the good sort stories on the TV. People forgetting themselves and helping others. Goodwill and sharing is alive and well. But at government level, it needs more effort. Maitreya has said he'll present humanity with 2 alternative scenarios of the future. Either continue in the selfish, greedy ways of the past and destroy ourselves, or accept the principles of sharing and create a brilliant new civilization where all may participate as full members of the human family. Maitreya is in no doubt about the choice humanity will make. He says, the success of my mission depends on you. You must make this choice, whether you share and learn to live peacefully as true men, or perish utterly. My heart tells me your answer, your choice, and is glad. The immediate priority will be the saving of millions of people now starving to death in the developing world. Maitreya will propose a crash program of aid on a world scale to alleviate this suffering. As humanity begins to accept the principle of sharing, the people call on governments to implement this principle. Each country will make an inventory of its assets and needs. These statistics will provide a United Nations agency set up for this purpose with the information required for a rational redistribution of the world's resources. That which each country has in excess of its needs will be put aside in trust for the world. The plans for such a redistribution program, drawn up by economists, financiers and industrialists of great achievement, are already in existence, awaiting only the demand of humanity for their implementation. A sophisticated form of barter on a global scale will eventually replace the present economic system. There will be opposition to such plans from some of the more privileged members of society who will see a loss of their traditional status and power. But the need for change will become so obvious that they will find themselves increasingly powerless to halt the momentum.
And it does feel like that's beginning to happen, doesn't it?
It does, yes. I feel it's really good news coming up.
Can I share a little story that really inspired me?
Sure.
It was about Captain Tom. I don't know whether you've seen him on Facebook, and he's 99 years old, and he decided that, you know, he walks with a walker, and he decided that he would do 100 laps of his driveway before he was 100 years old. And he thought that
it's amazing, isn't it?
I know, and he put it up for, you know, thinking he'd maybe raise £1,000, which he would give to the NHS and the workers there. And people around the world have seen it. And yesterday I heard he'd raised £12 million.
Oh my God, is that right?
12 million, that's amazing. And that's just from all around the world because people have seen it, you know, and it just shows that generosity and the fact that somebody like him can, you know, just an old man of 99 can make such a difference. And that's what Maitreya said, wasn't he? That nobody is too old or too weak or too sick to make a difference, you know.
Exactly. And that's a fantastic example.
So another little example that I had that really inspired me, and it's about sort of about right relationship, really, that Maitreya often talks about, is this man working with the poor communities in Africa. And he has a lot of problems with the gang members there who are always killing each other and creating, you know, mayhem. But he's managed to actually encourage the gang member leaders to work with him, and they are now providing food for the community. I mean, and it might be selfish because obviously the community is where they do their business, but they are actually working together, have seized all hostilities, and he's calling it an absolute miracle. And even though the gang leaders have said, well, I don't know whether we'll always stop killing each other, whether we'll go back to how we were, it feels to me that, you know, this what's happening is really trying to get people to see each other as human beings and work alongside each other in the spirit of cooperation. And who knows that, you know, those hostilities, after all this is, they might find they don't want to kill each other or, you know, have opposite views and really create mayhem in their community. So we shall have to wait and see. But those sort of things are happening around the world in many different sort of examples. And that one is another one that really inspired me. So I thought I'd share it.
Great.
Okay, Nigel, so we've got to hear about some predictions. I'm looking forward to this. It's always good to be reminded. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you, Shafir, and thank you, Peter. It was really interesting what Peter said about governments sharing their surplus resources to others in need, because, of course, that's been a central teaching of Maitreya's. You know, we've covered that over many programs, and it's great to hear the examples that have been spoken about on the program so far. Okay, so as I said earlier, I'm going to focus on some of those political, educational and economic predictions that have been made by Benjamin Creme through Maitreya's teachings, and just talk about some of those predictions and forecasts which are actually unfolding right now. And the obvious one to me that's sort of coming up in the news all over the globe at the moment, and has been for a couple of years, but now it's at the forefront through the lockdown, is the UBI, the Universal Basic Income. Back in 1991, Benjamin Creme wrote, "Market forces is the basis of the Western economic system," and he said that it must change. According to Maitreya, we must bring together capitalism and communism into a kind of social democracy or a democratic socialism. which would be a fusion of the best aspects of both systems. And I noticed that just a few days ago in the Easter Sunday letter, Pope Francis was promoting further consideration of a universal basic income. And I'm quoting the Pope here. He said, "How difficult it is to stay at home for those who live in tiny, ramshackle dwellings, or for the homeless." He said, "How difficult it is for migrants, those who are deprived of freedom, and those in rehabilitation from addiction." The Pope suggested that a reordering of priorities in the aftermath of the current crisis should eventually lead to a universal access to the 3 T's. And in Spanish, which is what he was speaking, he was talking about the social movements defending trabajo, teco, and tierra, which in English means work, housing, and land and food. And he has frequently referred to this, providing adequate provision of the 3 T's, and as we say in English, the 3 L's, land, labour, and lodging. And the Pope was talking at length in this speech that these are fundamental to justly ordered societies. And I can't help but think that when I hear the Pope speaking like this, that he's speaking the same language as what we have been talking about here at Share International for a number of years. And here in New Zealand, for the first time since the early 1980s, I noticed the Labour government is now reconsidering a universal basic income for New Zealand. Our finance minister acknowledged 3 weeks ago that a UBI in New Zealand is one of a number of options on the table that are being seriously considered by our New Zealand administration. And I find that really encouraging. And of course, a UBI, a universal basic income, is not new to New Zealand. Back in 1946, a family benefit was introduced. And I remember as a child, my mother used to get $6 for each of her children. And of course, the current superannuation for all over 65 years of age is essentially a universal basic income for our older citizens in New Zealand, which means that there is a level of certainty with your income, because as we all know, we are now living in a new normal, and that new normal is uncertainty. And a lot of people live from payday to payday. And during this lockdown, I think a lot of people are realizing there's an instability regarding their employment and whether they still will hold on to their full-time job or whether it will turn into a part-time position. And how are people going to pay for their food and meet their mortgage responsibilities? So I really am encouraged that Grant Robertson, our New Zealand Finance Minister, is at least considering the concept of a universal basic income across our population. And I know that the first thing you'll hear is a criticism from economists that we can't afford it, but it would replace a lot of the current welfare benefits that are already in system. And I've noticed on this subject that the Swiss have voted in a referendum to decide whether or not every citizen should receive $2,500 per month. And this would be a guaranteed basic income for all in that country. And this idea is also currently being explored in the Netherlands and in Finland. And of course, I know in Scandinavia that back in 2017, they had a test run, or they had 2,000 people as an experiment to see how a universal basic income would work. So there are examples of this around the world. And Krem talked about a universal basic income many years ago in one of those volumes that you spoke of earlier, Peter, in one of the Maitreya mission volumes, that it is the way of the future. So therefore, if there's less stress in your life, then we're able to take better of our physical health and also our mental well-being.
So I actually heard that Spain is actually going to introduce it.
Is that right?
Wow. Yeah. So they're seriously looking at it. So that's a great step forward, isn't it?
So future direction of politics everywhere will be towards greater cooperation and consensus. And it's great to hear what Shafir just said about Spain looking at the UBI as well. And there have been other examples of working with greater cooperation and consensus through this COVID-19 virus pandemic. And as Peter indicated earlier, there's been tremendous generosity and sharing by the Chinese government. And I noticed also Taiwan have donated 10 million masks to the US, to the United States, no less. Also the EU, Spain, Italy and France, and to other Southern Asian nations. And the Taiwanese NGOs have also donated masks to each Philippine hospital that is in need of that medical protection at the moment. And, you know, as we've said before, governments sharing their surplus resources, when you consider it, it makes absolute economic sense. Another example is the French military sending more than 2 tons of emergency supplies from its base in New Caledonia to Vanuatu after the devastation from the tropical cyclone Harold. Mm-hmm. According to the Vanuatu Red Cross, most people in the disaster zone have lost their homes. So the French military, these kits that they have donated were made up of tents, basic kitchen items, which have been held in stock by the Red Cross in Nouméa as part of the emergency support provided by France, and also Australia and New Zealand have been helping out as well. And because of the COVID-19 outbreak in New Caledonia, the plane was offloaded in Port Vila by the French crew as to avoid any contact with the people in Vanuatu, because of course in Vanuatu, so far to date, they have no recorded COVID-19 cases. And just to finish, I thought I'd finish with an anthroposophical view on the current pandemic crisis affecting virtually, well, most nations currently. And it goes like this: nature is not affected by the corona pandemic. Rather, it breathes a sigh of relief.
This is the Emergence News on Plains FM. For more information, go to shareinternational.org.
Okay, so I'd just like to finish with a little poem that's been going around the internet and says something about what this time is. And it goes, and the people stayed home and read books and listened and rested and exercised and made art and played games and learned new ways of being and were still and listened more deeply. Some meditated, some played, some danced, some met their shadows. And the people began to think differently, and the people healed. And in the absence of people living in ignorant, dangerous, mindless, heartless ways, the earth began to heal. And when the danger passed and the people joined together again, they grieved their losses and made new choices and dreamed new images and created new ways to live and heal the earth fully as they had been healed.
That was a lovely poem.
Yeah, I thought so.
A nice way to finish.
All this information can be found on the Share International website, www.share-international.org. Scorpio Books in Christchurch carries the magazine and some books. And also don't forget the podcasts, which are available on the Plains FM website.
We welcome your comments, questions and feedback. Please contact us at emergencenews@gmail.com.
The opportunity to join our transmission is available Monday and Wednesday evenings and Thursday mornings, which gives us the possibility to do a service meditation in conjunction with Masters.